Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources. I have tackled an aspect of this topic on the podcast before, but it's been a while, and it has to do with how to say no. In episode 117, I cover reasons we struggle to say no and give specific ways you can do so without feeling guilty or rude. This was dedicated especially to my fellow people pleasers, and you'll definitely want to listen to it in conjunction with this one. But think of today's episode as a prequel. Now we're digging into the consequences of our choices and understanding when it's especially important to stand our ground. You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and I'm a big fan of saying no. Granted, I wasn't always good at it. As a recovering people pleaser and a multi-passionate creative, I actually love saying yes to people and opportunities. But I've also learned what will happen if I'm not careful, intentional, and selective. When you're a giver, you have the best of intentions, and serving others is a sign of a big, beautiful heart. But my years in survival mode as a caregiver taught me that saying yes in certain instances can cause so much damage. Thankfully for me, the damage wasn't irreparable, but it was pretty severe, and it scared me and taught me a lesson about how crucial our boundaries are and how overextending ourselves is not something to be praised. When you're a multi-passionate creative and love all the ideas and all the things, it can be so hard to say no because you don't want to miss out. But I've also experienced what happens when too many yeses become a collection of projects that then aren't my best work, mid, as the kids say, and many times a point of resentment eventually instead of inspiration, which is completely opposite of the initial point. You know that feeling when you've overextended yourself and you're regretting taking on too much? That's something that can be avoided. I've lived a life where I struggled to say no for so many reasons, and now as a productivity and accountability coach, I've seen these same struggles with my clients. Whether it comes from a sense of obligation or fear of missing out, or a tendency like being an obliger or a people pleaser. Their inability to say no when warranted causes stress, overwhelm, and even burnout. Protecting them and you from this fate is my primary mission as a coach, as well as a podcaster. But why is this my focus when the title is Productivity Coach? It's because in order to become more productive and to thrive, we need to make sure you're safe and that you have the energy and desire to do what you're doing. And boundaries are how we get there. Let's explore why and when you must embrace the power of no to reclaim your time, energy, and peace of mind. Before we do, I want to preface this by saying I have tackled an aspect of this topic on the podcast before, but it's been a while, and it has to do with how to say no. In episode 117, I cover reasons we struggle to say no and give specific ways you can do so without feeling guilty or rude. This was dedicated especially to my fellow people pleasers, and you'll definitely want to listen to it in conjunction with this one. But think of today's episode as a prequel. Now we're digging into the consequences of our choices and understanding when it's especially important to stand our ground. Let's start with the consequences of continually saying yes. One of the most important things to understand about saying yes is that every yes is also a no. Sometimes multiple no's, often multiple no's. So you need to be crystal clear about what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to, because it's always going to be both. This is where the consequences of continually saying yes end up building exponentially. If one yes means a no for you or your family, for example, continued yeses will exacerbate that, driving you further from what matters, further from the point that you wanted to be at. And if one yes to working late on a project means less sleep for you and therefore less self-care, a no to self-care and a no to sleep, continued yeses to other demands are not going to get you back where you want to be. They're not going to give you back your personal time. They're going to take you further away from what you need. While saying yes can feel good in the moment, it can have serious consequences. Juggling too much and having the pressure of expectations from others and your own can create a constant stress response that can even become chronic and then eventually lead to burnout. And in the process, you'll struggle to focus properly, which means you may end up struggling to actually complete what you promised you would. This can trigger anxiety and shame. Ultimately, it's a vicious cycle far more painful than having to say no in the first place. So the benefits of saying no when necessary, well, they are often the opposite. So conversely, when you say no, though it may feel difficult in the moment, it has many positive consequences that will be worth that initial discomfort and the feelings of guilt you may have. When you say no, you are setting healthy boundaries that are good for you and others. You're prioritizing your own needs, which is not only a healthy practice, it's one that will help others understand your limits so they can honor them too. In episode 117, where I share the most important boundary for people pleasers, I share a quote from Prentice Hemphill about boundaries that really hits home. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Setting healthy boundaries by saying no is a way to practice self-respect, which acts as a reminder that you value your own time and energy and refuse to compromise your well-being. That's a powerful message to send to your own mind as well as to others, and it creates a strong foundation to encourage other positive choices that reflect your self-worth. It's just like having a good, positive keystone habit will encourage you to have other good habits. And if that's not enough for reasons, let me add one more thing. Saying yes to everything can lead to inner conflict, anger, resentment, and stress. And I'm sure when I say those words, you can think of instances where you felt that regret. Oh, I never should have said yes to this. And this happens in part because you shut out a chance to do what you love. There's something you would have rather been doing, but you said yes and you have to follow through. Saying no in those intentional and strategic places will reduce that inner conflict and create space for you to be able to pursue what you're passionate about. So when is the best time to say no? It's not just about learning to say no. That's important. We want to do that. But if you value being there for others and exploring opportunities, you want to do this the right way. So it's important to figure out when saying no is essential for you. And that figuring out when will then help you with the how. So consider saying no when you're already overcommitted. That's the most obvious one, right? Time is not an option in your calendar. You cannot fit any more in. If your plate's already full, don't hesitate to say no to additional commitments. It's far better to decline politely than try to overextend yourself, risk burnout, and most people will understand this. You want to consider saying no when it's not in alignment with your goals. If a request or opportunity doesn't align with you, say no. Your time is precious. And one of the favorite phrases that I've heard is like, it needs to be a hell yes, right? Otherwise, it's a hell no. It's being ruthless in what you determine belongs in your life. You want to invest in activities that truly matter to you, that fit into your life. And you can still appreciate an opportunity without it being the right choice for you, especially at this particular time. You also want to consider saying no when it doesn't feel right. This is another type of alignment consideration, but it relates more to your values. When you take action, but it doesn't feel right, you're creating something called cognitive dissonance. It's a mental discomfort that comes from conflicting beliefs working against each other. It causes a really icky feeling, anxiety, stress, guilt, shame, and it can even impact your self-esteem. So trust your gut. If a request makes you feel uncomfortable or uneasy, it's a sign you need to say no. Great, Lisa. So here's some opportunities when to say no, but how do I assess these? I have 5 things that will help you evaluate obligations and opportunities that come your way. Actually, I shouldn't even use the word obligations, but we'll just say the opportunities that come your way. You'll see why I didn't want to use the word obligations in just a minute. Number 1, you want to determine your calendar max. We talked before about, can you fit it into your calendar? So it's easy to say, don't do it if you don't have room on your calendar. But I have personally seen clients cram things in their day like they're stuffing the hall closet when cleaning for company that's coming by in a few minutes. It might, quote, fit, I got air quotes going here, but it's not feasible. So when I say be sure you have room, you want to base it on your best level of activity, not if you can actually technically fit it in. And I know you know what I'm talking about, right? Someone asks you to do something, you want to do it, and you're like, well, I guess we could like cram it in. As soon as you use the word cram, you know you have to step back and figure something else out. So this is figuring out a baseline for what is best for you. And then that means a cutoff that there isn't technically more room unless you make it. Number 2 is to decide what matters most. We're back to values again. They're one of the first things I examine with my clients for a reason, because they help create a filter to determine what belongs and what doesn't. So take a look at your current obligations and priorities before making any new commitments and ask yourself if the new commitment is important to you, if it fits your life and your beliefs, does it belong with the rest of them, or is there something off about it? If it's something you feel strongly about and you have time in the calendar, go for it. But if not, it may have to be a no, or at the very least, a not now, until you can figure out more information or figure out where you're going to place it. So if you feel strongly and there isn't enough room, it might be time to say no to something else you'd said yes to, especially if that was one that maybe you shouldn't have said yes to, so that you can sub in this new opportunity. And yeah, that's allowed. You get to choose, so swap it. Number 3 is to consider the difficulty and time frame. This is a really important component when you're considering your options. So is this new activity you're considering short or long term? For example, making some brownies for a bake sale is far different than joining a committee with a multiple year term that meets every month. Ask me how I know. Yeah, I've gotten into this trap before myself. The good news is that while you may need to say no to a specific ask, that doesn't mean that you can't look for other ways to pitch in and still be able to help. So again, don't be afraid to offer what you can, but say no at certain points when it is not going to work for you and not allow you to keep showing up as your best self. Number 4, don't let guilt be the driver. I see this one a lot. Don't agree to a request you would rather decline out of guilt or obligation. That's the quickest way to stress yourself out and end up resentful. And at that point, nobody's happy, and oftentimes we don't do the job that we'd like to do because of those feelings. Sabotage rears its ugly head. So I want you to watch for words like should, and supposed to, because those are traps. And number 5 is to take some time to decide. Don't be in a rush. Are you tempted by a request? Like you actually really want to say yes? It is your choice, but make sure it's a slow yes. Before you respond, take some time to think about it, how it fits in your life, what kind of energy you have right now, what's going on alongside of it, maybe even checking with trusted friends or family members or anyone that might be affected by your choice. They always say sleep on it. And if you can't sleep on it, if you don't have that much time, at least take a little bit of time to think the request through before answering. And as is my favorite thing to do, ask questions. Most people understand needing time and needing clarification before you say yes. And if it's something that you're thinking of doing, ask yourself those same questions you would ask someone else. And if you're really not sure what those questions are, hi, I'm here to help. There are plenty of times in your life that you want to say yes, and I encourage you to do so. Seize opportunities, help others, give of yourself, because you have so much to offer. But please, don't do it to your own detriment. I encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with the word no. Is it difficult for you? Are you saying yes a bit too often? What are some areas in your life where you could benefit from setting better boundaries? Start practicing with something simple today. Look at a request or an opportunity and filter it through what we talked about today. And then be sure to message me and let me know what you decided and why. I am cheering you on as you figure out ways to say no and to build better boundaries that are going to help you show up in the best possible way. And remember, it's not simply about saying no, though I do encourage you to practice that. The most important takeaway today is realizing that it's when you say no that makes a big difference. This comes with practice and continued self-awareness, and you are in the right place for that. We're going to keep working on it. So keep learning your limits so you can honor them, and keep setting and resetting those boundaries so you can reduce stress, increase focus, and achieve your goals. Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.